Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here for the Rencontres Économiques for this conference. The subject is bridging cultures across borders. My name is Laurent. I work for Boursorama. I'm Director of Information. I'm going to be chairing this session. You can be Director of Information of a science magazine and be very interested in culture. So Françoise BENHAMOU is here from the Cercle des Economistes around the table to talk about this subject today. We have Carina JAATINEN from the Museum of Finnish Architecture and Design. Hello, Carina. We have quite different profiles, people with different backgrounds. We have Christopher PRATT, who is a skipper and professional navigator. Mathilde VERMER, author, creator of the Poetic Experience podcast. Hello, Mathilde. We also have Jiakai YUAN, founder and CEO of Shanghai Ethno-Philanthropy Fund. Hello, Jiakai. And with us also online, we have Dominique MEYER, President and Artistic Director of Scala de Milan. Hello, Dominique. Hello, everybody. Françoise, I don't know what you think. I think we have the most interesting debate of the whole day. The whole 3 days, you mean? Whole 2 days, yes. Yes, a few words of introduction, perhaps, just to start the discussion. There are many, many things to say, and we have some very interesting speakers from many different backgrounds, and I'm sure it would be impossible to describe everything they do. So we're talking about bridging cultures. Let's say, first of all, straight away, that cultures are linked to value systems and hierarchies of values and beliefs, which can be religious beliefs, which are not necessarily designed to be reconciled or be brought together. Rather than bridging, I would say creating a dialogue and creating tolerance. People might have thought globalization, with the favoring circulation of works of art and cultural content, would contribute to bridging the cultures. And in a very relevant book, an economist, Tyler Cohen, has been able to show that globalization nourishes a kind of uniformization and standardization of contents between societies and countries, and that this brings new forms of culture and hybridization of exchanges between societies. That's quite positive. But behind this uniformization, there's not necessarily any bridging. Uniformization is often based on the commercialization of culture and cultural content. For example, 3 major groups dominate the worldwide musical industry: Warner, Universal, and Sony, representing 70% of the worldwide market. And in addition, the increasing tensions in the international scene and the accentuation of competition in terms of soft power also are reducing the possibility for bridging cultures. This can take place within societies also, which can lead to an increase in polarization, and we've seen that very much in France recently and also around the world. So what is the role of culture, the creation of cultural policies? How can they contribute to dialogue and tolerance? There are often recurring oppositions when you talk about cultural policy between the policy of offer, supply, policy of demand, the policy based on territories rather than based on conurbations, support of major institutions rather than small institutions, local approach or national approach vis-à-vis an international worldwide approach, also private sector versus public sector, and also the suspicion about philanthropic activities. So we could look at all these different oppositions, but it's also possible to overcome them. Let me give you an example. There's a festival in Aix-en-Provence, for example, here. For this festival, you might think, so should it be local? If it's too local, maybe we're going to reduce the quality or reduce the diversity, certainly. So we have to find the right balance between local artists and national artists or international artists. Not always easy, but this might be one of the answers to help bridge cultures. It seems to me that it is It's by overcoming these barriers that we'll be able to encourage this dialogue. And we also have to look at the different regimes play a role in the cultural sphere and can reduce the dialogue between cultures. For example, if we look at Italy, for example, in La Scala, Giorgia Meloni has imposed Italians at the as the heads of museums and opera houses, and is putting the priority on works that are favoring a new national world of imagination. So these different worlds can exist next to each other, and this can be very original. We have to be able to welcome the broadest audiences possible if we want to be able to encourage pacification of our societies, and this is something that is very necessary today, because our societies are too often polarized and divided. Thank you, Françoise. He has run the Opera House of Paris and the Opera of, and he is now director of Scala of Milan. In fact, Dominique MEYER, bringing together people from different cultures and getting them to work together on every day, that's really your everyday job, isn't it? Yes. It's probably the best part of my job, in fact, because running an opera is like being the Tower of Babel. And I remember when I was working at Vienna, there was a permanent group of singers, which doesn't really happen in France very much. It's more of a Germanic approach, so I had singers who were from Korea, Japan, China, South Africa, South America, who all worked together. It was very interesting. Part of the activity is completely open. For example, when we're holding our auditions, you look at the identity card of the person to see if they're able to interpret a particular role. However, there are political forces at the moment who are trying to compartmentalize. For example, in Italy, there are politicians who would like to have a national preference when we choose the different artists. Very often they are people, it's often the agents of these artists who lobby the politicians to put in place this compartmentalization, and often the press plays a role. A few years ago, I was in a jury for a singing competition, and most of the finalists were Koreans. They were from Korea. They were very good. And a journalist asked me, "Are you prepared to give the first prize to a Korean?" I said, whoever is the best singer will win the competition, whether they're from Korea or South Africa or wherever. I said to them, so that led me to think a little. I said to them, you need to think a little bit about the reasons why in these countries the map of the world is changing. In these Asian countries, a lot of young people and young women are very interested in our culture than the culture of their own country. That's the question. For a young Korean singer or Chinese singer, Western culture is a very, very remote, distant world. Just imagine that young French people would want to sing in the Chinese opera. I think it'd be incredibly difficult for them. I find it extraordinary that they have such love for Western culture in these countries. Often it's, for example, in South Africa, there is a generation, an extraordinary generation of singers with extremely talented teachers who have fostered this interest in Western culture. I think when you look at the level of cultural production, it's important to open your arms to all of the different countries. There are political manipulations and economic manipulations, which means that sometimes people to create barriers. But in Italy, they have adapted a law to send myself and Stefan Esther to retirement. But for the moment, you're still here, Dominique. For a few more months, yes. I'm still here for a few more months, despite this law. One thing that struck me, you talked about opening your arms to international culture. Carina, is that part of your role as a director of a museum and also as a member of the International Conference of Museums? Is that a priority? Above and beyond all of the contingencies we're starting to see, and also for the different cultural activities. For you, is this a fundamental approach to open up to others?
First of all, museums are about culture and cultural change, and cultural connections are one of the main drivers of cultural transformation. And yes, museums are extremely internationally networked, and of course we also have international audiences. I would like to maybe raise one point from the perspective of museums. These intercultural connections should be always looked as historical continuums, and I think that is something that we have to pay attention to. And museums are great places also to learn about these historical developments and how these intercultural connections on the museum field has changed. I think quite essential is to look at the historical changes. And for instance, if we take the collections of the major European museums and their collections, we see how they reflect kind of the oppressive and abusive relationship with non-European cultures in the colonial era. And now if we look at the situation today, we see that the connections are continuing, they are still there, but now along the process of decolonization and reconciliation and in open intercultural dialogue, really, truly. And I think for museums, but also for in societies in general, I think this shift from abusive towards non-abusive relationship is quite essential. And here I think it's not possible without a kind of ability to be a self-critical and have self-reflection. And that again, I think it requires very strong freedom of speech and research and education, as well as respect of international and domestic law. And that's why it's really concerning and worrying also, as Françoise also referred to, there is the development in Europe at the moment. We see the polarization and militarization, and we see the erosion of democratic principles in European countries too. And I think that's the thing that also the museums have to fight against. And
bon, on voit déjà effectivement.
Yes. When we were preparing this debate, we saw that things are becoming more and more complicated. And basically, people don't want to choose the nationality of a singer. They don't want to choose a religion of a singer. That doesn't have to matter. Do we want to choose the culture of a sailor when you're in the middle of an ocean? You're a sailor. I'm not a sailor myself. I don't know the technological terms. You're on a little boat in the middle of the ocean. You just want to be able to make sure everybody works together as a team. You're not really worried about nationality. Yes, absolutely. I am reacting to what the president of La Scala said. We don't. We say, I only want to have French people with me on the boat. No, we're not. We're looking at their skills as a mariner, and their human skills, their soft skills. That's absolutely fundamental when you're on a boat together, where you're in for several weeks with 4 or 5 of you. A very small living space of 4 or 5 square meters. This is a bit like being in a space module in outer space. It's best if everybody gets on together. So it's extremely important to be able to make sure everything works. And this multicultural aspect is very important to have the best possible performance of our team, to have a common vocabulary and references. And in any team and in any company, this is always the case. It's important to have this cultural diversity, and in any case, this is how we see this in high-level sport and high-level team sport with different nationalities. This is something I've experienced in the latest round-the-world team competition. There were 4 different nationalities in my team. It's very important to have this multiculturalism. in the team, so you have a good management of risk and good management of decisions. When you have people have different culture, different biases, yes, right, I imagine not everybody navigates and sails in the same way, that's right. So the only solution to take the right decision, here we're at the economic meetings, Daniel Kahneman said this, the best thing is to remove the biases from our decisions. And the best way of doing that is to have people around the table who are going to take the decision and have different biases. The power of multiculturalism is exactly there in high-level sport and in any kind of organization. But for it to work, the prerequisite is to have created a reference base and a common vocabulary, have taken the time to work on that in advance to avoid any of these issues that you can have of misunderstandings, not on a fundamental level, but on in terms of the content. So the importance of this common vocabulary cannot be exaggerated. I think it applies to other types of organization. When you're in the middle of the ocean or in the middle of the Pacific, you're on neutral ground. Perhaps it's the last base where nobody has put a flag yet. It's true that the concept of a border, although we could say it exists less and less, or maybe it's being reintroduced in Europe a little bit now, but at sea, clearly, there are no borders. There are waters that are international waters, although sometimes some waters belong to a certain country. This is something you don't feel at all. And as you said, it remains one of the last spaces of freedom where we are completely absolved from this subject of barriers or borders or regulations. Another important aspect you might want to react to is interesting when we're talking about about maritime law, which is this solidarity of mariners. So if you have a problem, any other vessel has to change their course and come and help you. Yes, they have to. This is maritime law. There is an obligation. It's part of our culture. And this solidarity between mariners. But it's maritime law has this obligation for other vessels to help a vessel that is in difficulty. Then you can talk about different issues of migrants, etc., where it becomes a much more difficult and complex situation, and their maritime law no longer can be, or some people don't want to apply it in the same way. Then it becomes much more complex in political terms. But in any case, I think that on this subject of how we bring cultures together, I think the sea and the events that take place at sea are something that can be transferred, and it still works. Yes, it still works. Okay, Mathilde, maybe we should start from a different point of view. Maybe we've moved a little bit quickly onto this subject. When we discussed this earlier, you were saying, okay, it's fine bridging cultures, but what's going to happen when you bridge cultures? Let's look at what the message is going to be when you're bridging cultures. Yes, absolutely. I was thinking specifically of art, because we have many different types of artists, and some of them want to promote values of brotherhood and universality and solidarity and beauty as well. It's a role of art to connect us with beauty, and other artists don't have those same values. Today, I think it's interesting to find artists who will bring two people together regardless of borders. And there are several interesting facts that have an impact on society. For example, the Me Too movement a few years ago started in Hollywood with major cultural players from the movies, and they made statements in favor. They denounced violence against women, and they launched a huge movement. And so culture still has an impact when it involves the major players. And this can be the same. You see the phenomenon in music and in cinema. Very recently, for example, I'm thinking of the Taylor Swift tour, the Eras tour, an American singer. She has an tremendous economic power as well, and political power as well, because she's an opponent of Trump. She embodies something which seems to wake up amongst people a desire to come together and to celebrate the values of love. This is what she says herself. We have Beyoncé as well, who has recently made pronouncements against racism and in favor of multiculturalism. And these artists bring people together right around the world. And as I want to talk about poetry, I don't know if it's the right time, as we're talking about otherness and values, as this is my passion, is contemporary poetry. Today it's very interesting to see that we have poets and women poets around the world especially who are writing very short texts and are saying very powerful things about our era and about human nature. And so I wanted to read you something. We have André Chedid, who is a poet you may know of. He was born in Cairo. She was born in Cairo. He was Lebanese and is now French. It's part of a long line of artists in France. I want to read you a text where she talks about otherness. I wanted to read it to you. Today at the Rencontres Économiques, where we don't talk a lot about poetry. This is the first round table we're going to read out poetry and the Rencontres d'Aix. So run by the scientific director of Boursorama. Yes, it's quite something. And the interpreter would just like to say that poetry is extremely difficult to interpret, so I'll do my best. So this poem is called The Other. My Other. My person who resembles me, in this flesh that makes me up, in this heart that beats, in this blood that cavalcades, in this death that is awaiting us, and in this brotherhood of our brief lives, our brothers, our others, wherever you are, I am. Magnificent. It's worthy of a round of applause, I think. Taylor Swift makes people want you to come together and to know others. You said, Mathilde. Isn't this the aim of philanthropy as well, to get people to want to know, to meet and to talk to other people, to smooth out the difficulties that can occur, to get people to want to have a common objective, a cultural objective?
Thank the host for the invitation. It's my first time to be in this city. It's a lovely city. And go back to your question. I think, for me, it's kind of interesting. The multiculturalism has been sort of brought up so many times. But I would say we Chinese, we're not very good at multiculturalism because we have 1.4 billion people. But 92% of the population is Han and ethnicity. So we are learning about connecting cultures. So I'm really here to learn and to explore.
To learn to connect.
Exactly, exactly. As for philanthropy, Ethno, my fund is a startup fund that I founded last November. So basically, we have a group of young entrepreneurs, Chinese entrepreneurs. They're interested in international cultural exchange because even though, again, globalization has been talked about, yesterday and today, but I'm not sure how many people in the audience know that China only joined WTO 2001. So if you take the 3-year COVID away, so China is really been part of the globalization less than about 20 years. So we're still learning.
It's still really recent.
It is very recent. So we are learning, and also a little bit about my kind of a personal story. The first person in my family with a undergraduate degree. I'm the first person in my family with a master's degree. Mm-hmm. I'm also the first person in my family that worked in a multinational company. And in my relatively short career, the 20 years of it, it's North America related. So I think China is really learning to embrace the multipolar culture world, a world that is beyond North America and the US. So again, I'm really here to learn about culture elsewhere and really to explore opportunities for collaboration.
Bon, voilà. Être là pour apprendre, c'est un message magnifique. Et en même temps, dans ce qu'on dit, nos différents participants...
So this is very interesting. So what we see from what our different participants say is that it's becoming more complicated. often for the wrong reasons. Politics and the economic world start to get involved. As you were saying, Dominique, you have to deal not only with your role as a manager of the opera, you have to be a diplomat and an emissary and a politician to prevent people overlapping and trying to take over your activity. Without being too naive, most of the major opera houses are financed by state money to some extent. We're never separated from politics. For every opera house, it's the same. Is it more complicated now? Sometimes relationships can be very toxic. The trouble is that when politicians want to use culture as a vehicle for their political discourse, for example, or for their ideology. For example, at the moment, there's something quite amusing, which is UNESCO has decreed that Italian singing, bel canto, should be included as one of the worldwide treasures of humanity. So we've been asked to take action in that sense and to promote a bel canto. Yesterday evening we had the Mozart's Requiem. Tonight it'll be Turandot, which is Italian opera. We had a French opera, was produced 3 nights ago here. I wouldn't say bel canto is any better than beautiful French or German or Russian singing. It's completely absurd. What I observe that often for reasons to do with propaganda and ideology, people want to use culture for different purposes. I think this is rather naive. I have a lot of respect for UNESCO and also for the treasures of humanity, and whether it's for sausages or for operatic singing. I think it's a bit naive to have this approach, but nevertheless we can see that it's something that has been constructed. There has to be a declaration that is read as part of the television broadcast. So there's a kind of interference by politics in our activities, and this interference seeks to re-compartmentalize culture, which is, by its nature is very open. For example, in Norway, and recently there was a government which imposed use of Norwegian singers only in their opera house. That's absurd, because it just creates regression, and everything goes backwards. It means you have to have people coming from every country who do the best they can, who try to represent and perform the works as best they can. This international scene has always been extremely dynamic and alive in the world of opera and in the world of music in general. A year ago, I heard a speech where a Secretary of State of Culture in Italy explained that for example, there were many foreign singers singing at the Paris Opera. You have to remember the creator of the Paris Opera was Jean-Faustin Anouilh, and he made his family name French. In fact, he wasn't French originally, and his director of the Paris Opera is currently a German, and everybody's very happy with that. I explained this to this politician. I think sometimes there is a political manipulation. I think the cultural world is too strong for the politicians to be able to take it over. I think the market forces often create barriers as well, and can make things more complicated as well. Françoise, you had a question. Yes, I had a question, Dominique, about the circulation of works of art. We've talked a lot about fragmentation throughout these couple of days. Do you think that cooperation, I'm not talking about circulation of individual artists, I'm talking about the circulation of works of art and cooperations that you have with other opera houses. This fragmentation we're observing in the world of economics, is it something that's reflected in the world of culture as well?
No,
the cooperation between the European institutions is very strong. It's sometimes limited by politicians, as we saw recently in an exchange between France and Italy on temporary exhibits and the loan of works. But I find that in the field of music, opera, for example, the opera, there are the language barriers sometimes, but in opera, it's everyday life, and I would say simply because it passes through people, and everybody knows everybody. You know, even though it's an environment, it's a place where there are jealousies, and but people like each other. You know, they respect each other. We call it Garden. We work with the German opera houses. There is a lot of solidarity and the will to develop common projects in common. It's not always easy for a simple reason, and that is the way we can present works differs, changes. Beauty is not the same, is not perceived in the same way. We have to find a common language so that cooperation becomes possible. But it's always been the case in the last 50 years, and for economic reasons also. If at the Scala we have a new production that we propose 5, 6 or 7 times, well, great. If it's shown in Paris or London later, we agreed projects that have been designed and developed by colleagues from other countries. It's our everyday life. I don't see any hindrances or barriers to that effect. They're very interesting things that have been just said. At the same time, we talk about politics, even though Dominique says that it's an everyday topic. But politics, the politicians are more and more involved in culture, and at the same time, there is this economization, I don't know if it's a new word, a new formulation, where culture should be profitable. You know, culture is a luxury that it could be that culture is a luxury we could no longer afford. Culture could be a culture we can't afford. That's a big issue in terms of profitability.
I think you are referring to our Minister of Finances in Finland,
Voilà.
and she really she represents the True Finns, which is the right-wing populist party. And before the elections, she stated that culture is a luxury product that we can't unfortunately afford. We are spending too much money on culture. So I was
et on précise que les finances publiques, la fin.
And we must say that the public finances in Finland are in a much better state than here, for example.
Now they are really cutting heavily at the moment in kind of austerity politics, and even our Minister of Finances presented herself in social media with huge scissors just to make jokes about these cuts, which was a little bit shaky. I think regarding the funding, of course, for the museums, which are not-for-profit institutions, and still we have the huge responsibility to take care and preserve the cultural heritage of humanity. So we cannot do it only based on for-profit, of course, but still museums are changing very rapidly, and actually it's interesting that we are, for instance, creating a new museum of architecture and design in Finland, and it's a big enterprise between state and the city of Helsinki, and they have both invested 60 million euros, and there are also private investors, and now there is a company, limited liability company, that is running the museum where I work. And even if it's not for profit, it's expected to generate own income, like about 50% of its income. And we know that the public funding is going down all the time. So I think museums, I would like to say one thing, because I think museums are really, really potential and appealing partners to business life. For instance, And the main reason why it is so is that museums enjoy the public trust. For instance, American Alliance of Museums makes this survey regularly, and there, according to those results, museums top the ranking of most trustworthy institutions. They are more trustworthy to people than news, media, politicians, of course, but also like research institutions, books. And I think this is the most valuable assets the museums have, and we know what kind of crises sometimes also occur when museums make kind of wrong partnerships. But on the other hand, to be able to make the impact in the society, and I think museums are really powerful tools because we have the ability to work with communities. We have like hundreds of millions of visits every year globally. So we reach people and we can affect how they are thinking by what we are presenting to them and how we are inviting them to discuss together things. So I think we should work together. Museums have never worked alone and we never have had the resources, but we have to find new ways to collaborate to make the highest and best possible impact to the society.
Ouais, trouver de nouvelles façons de collaborer, on y viendra. Mais...
Find new ways of collaborating, yes, we'll go back to this. I have a question for Mathilde. Poetry. Should poetry be profitable? Should make money? Yeah, very good question, yes, okay. To which I would answer with the answer of a poet. By definition, poetry is useless. And since it's useless, it's used for everything. It's multi-purpose. Poetry responds to this demand of human beings for meaning, for connecting, for connection, communion with others, communion with nature, communion with a sense that is over our heads. Even if we have public policies that tell us that art is luxury, we feel like crying, you know, when we hear this. Where's Churchill? Come on, Churchill, get out of your grave. And during the war, he said, if we didn't have art or culture, why would we fight? Why should we fight? Churchill is Nobel Prize in literature. He's really into art. He used to paint and things. So we desperately need art. And even if public policies no longer invest or subsidize, and even if we hear some voices against culture, the human being will always seek culture and art because human beings need it. It's parents that tell stories to their children, tales, people who sing, people who read books, and some at the peril of their lives, endangering their lives, you know. Culture has always been a power of resistance. That's why so many artists through time and different periods have been jailed. And whatever happens, I feel like having to say something very positive on the fact that beyond adversity, there will always be artists. And in this movement, if we see so many poetry at this time of AI, social media, if people around the planet, in the US, Macnish in the UK, Cécile Coulon, Rim Batal in France, in Morocco, and all those people, other names, propose poetry, it's because we need to say, to express what makes our human experience. That's where we get together. It's the experience of love, the experience of being alive, the experience of parentality, of mourning, of disease, illnesses. That's the human experience. We need art to sublimate all this and be able to find nourishment in there. And so it's art has an incredible value. And that's why politicians, the economy is involved. We saw the interference. Jiakai, you said we're here to learn. We're here to open up. In the end, China has joined the WTO not a long time ago. Is it easy to, at a time when we're under the impression that the world is closing up, when we are under the impression that people have no trust at the international level, people are distrustful, aren't you swimming against the flow?
Well, first of all, I mean, before this panel, I checked the number because, I mean, for the past 2 days, I didn't see many Chinese faces I think I saw less than 10 like Chinese here, but I checked the number. The trade between China and France is 79 billion a year, which is a large number. So I do see opportunities for the two countries to do more together. That's number one. And number two is for those that are not familiar with the philanthropy space in China. China is really going through arguably the greatest wealth transition in China's history. Because the first generation entrepreneurs, when they made their money, they're about to retire. So they're in their 70s. So they're passing their money to their children. And interestingly, I would say 95 or 99% of their kids are educated in the West. So unlike their parents, making money probably is the only thing that they're passionate about. Their kids are very much different.
Vous sentez une aspiration à cet échange culturel, à cette ouverture?
There's an aspiration for the change. Do you feel that the people want that change?
Absolutely. I mean, you can tell from the first generation entrepreneur versus the second generation entrepreneur. I mean, their passion is hugely different. So, I mean, I'm really excited about the philanthropy space in China for the next 10, 20 years. And also, I mean, the other area of opportunity is, for instance, one company that we work with. I wouldn't want to mention the name, but it's an internet company, and its daily active user is 100 million people. So I'm just trying to imagine, I mean, if you can have this access to 100 million people on a daily basis and to use that for culture exchange, I think that's really going to be a powerful tool to have. So again, I see great opportunities, and that's why I'm here to learn.
Bon, on n'avait pas envie.
We didn't want. No, we wanted to conclude this roundtable not on this note, the pessimistic note of worries, but rather on trying to find some solution paths. Bring cultures together is probably the best objective, but what can we do to work better, more efficiently for that goal? Dominique, do you have in your toolbox? Do you have solutions so that things can continue to evolve despite this slight pessimism? I don't know, but what I observe is that very often when there are boxing ups, it's because the people don't practice languages. May sound stupid, naive maybe, but people don't know languages. So maybe we should have 2 or 3 languages. I observed, for example, by coming here in Italy, very often there were very few contacts with international institutions because people didn't speak the language. And so very simple. It makes it sound simplistic, but I think it's essential. And I see also that the incidents that we have when you propose a new opera between the director and the singers, the problems often occur the fact that because they don't speak the language, they make believe that they understand each other, but they don't really. And so the gesture or the inflection is concrete. Well, you realize at that point that people misunderstood themselves. The problem is people don't master language. So I think one of the most important thing is to have people travel, circulate, to make them travel abroad, to make them breathe another air, cultural air and environment. There's a generation here at the Scala of young people who learn languages, and I send them everywhere in the world. I have them attend international meetings they didn't have access to before. I have them travel around the world and try to gain experience and to breathe, again, another air. It has a lot of merit because the enemy of culture is arrogance often, and it reduces the arrogance. Sometimes we feel superior because we don't see, we don't hear, we don't listen, we don't hear about the realities of other countries. I believe a lot in that, in limiting arrogance, having people travel, especially for those who will take responsibilities, learning languages and make people travel. Christopher, that's what you said from the beginning. You're the solution in a way. You all bring us on board your ship, your vessels. Yeah, it's exactly what we do with enterprises. We take them on board to work at sea and work on these topics. But in fact, yes, it's wonderful to hear that in the end we agree on solutions and on the opening up. And another, maybe a positive point in my small world of the sailing races, you know, the French racing system has exported around the world. We inherit from Tabarly, from other famous sailors for the solitary races. You know, in maritime laws, there's a permanent watch. So if you break the law, if you sail alone as a solitary sailor. But this idea is exported not in ultra-privileged countries. The idea is exported. And I had a Mexican woman who came to sail with me, and she has projects to organize races, solitary races, and we have other countries involved, and that's really motivating to see that this culture of sailing, solitary races, and everything is exportable. And is not only meant for an ultra-privileged Europe. Languages, learning to communicate at a time where digital tools are so powerful. We didn't address this too much, but sharing one's poetry and text is very simple today with the digital tools. Is it simple to say today that the technological tools exist? Yes, there is a new evolution for the circulation of cultural content. I have a podcast myself, and I use this with a lot of interest, development of podcasts in England, in the US, and in France. More than 35% listen to podcasts with very different contents, and we hear new voices that way. I think it's very important because the challenge with the AI is not only that it raises a lot of questions, but one of the issues of AI is that it speeds up. Things are going faster and faster, and with this acceleration, one of the risks I see as an artist is that it doesn't cut us out from our heads, but it's sort of like it's cutting us away from our hearts. But to bring people together, we need our hearts, we need our sensitivity, we need empathy, and the fact of the web enables to go around some of the barriers and able to contact more people. Well, okay, it's fantastic. Technology coming as a support to culture. Is that a solution, Carina, or any others, you think?
So for the museums, I think for us, the exchanges often has taken place, for instance, in the form of traveling exhibitions, and this has raised more and more questions from the point of sustainability. So it's like the CO2 prints, and for that reason, a lot of content is going more digital. So also the exchanges, the traveling exhibitions, I anticipate are going to be more and more digital in future too. One thing that I was thinking regarding what Dominique was saying, I think also the same limited arrogance can be experienced within our societies, in our backyards, in our schools, in our shops, like on the streets, everywhere, because we actually live in the multicultural societies, but we do not maybe acknowledge the different realities. And I think as museums, that's because we very much are bound still also to work locally in these buildings where we are. So, but as networks, we can like spread effectively our learnings and skills. But I think one powerful tool is to bring people, a different kind of people together, and to really achieve change. And because without real connection, you can't learn. You can't break your bubbles, and we don't actually know that we are living in our bubbles. So we should really help people to collide with them and cross the bubbles from
Voilà,
us.
faire éclater les bulles et puis qu'on puisse tous se mélanger rapidement.
So really get rid of the bubbles. So Jiakai, rapidly, what makes you optimistic? Do you have any reasons to be optimistic?
Yes, talking about solution, one thing that we are trying to build is a China-France philanthropy alliance, and we're building that with our French partners here. And two things that we're going to do that are relevant to today's discussion is, one is convening. Our goal is really to bring more Chinese business leaders to here. I mean, to participate in this type of discussions, to understand, I mean, challenges and opportunities here. And also, we're hoping to bring more people from France to China. So that's convening, that's number one. The second piece is young leader exchange. This is actually the one thing that I noticed from this forum is the amount of young people participating. That's just amazing, because if you go to, say, World Economic Forum, you only see like business CEOs and wearing suits. But here, I mean, you have young people coming and sharing their opinion. I think that's great. So I'm really hoping that I mean, we can have young French people visiting China, and really to build relations with the young people from China.
Françoise, conclusion, on prend les questions d'abord. Allez, on va prendre les questions si la salle en a.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll take a few questions from the room, from the floor, if there are any questions. My name is Maureen Pelopidas. I will enter political sciences in September. I have a question that I've had in the beginning of the session. You talked about the youth that are faced with a cultural mix, that are faced with using social networks, world culture. They're faced with artists like Taylor Swift, who are incredibly successful worldwide, who propose love and things. How can we today, faced with the rise of extremist movements and of course the RN in France, there is an identity fold back. Youth refuses to share culture, whereas it's the share of population that has the best access to tools to communicate and to open up. How can we face that if it's not youth that today loves the other, wants to open up? Who else can do that? How can we reconcile this polarized youth? I think we need an additional hour, maybe. We can't have an additional hour. So, essential question, who will answer?
Poser cette question.
So thank you for asking this question. I think it's dramatic what we see today. Obviously, there are a question of education. The philosopher Kant said that you educate taste. You educate taste. Taste is something that you can educate, and you have to foster relationships, encounters, how it is something that provides freedom, and not have this poor vision of human beings that are boiled down to consumers, and we think that it's the whole society that needs to rehabilitate the importance of culture, and know that life does not boil down to produce and consume. That's not the only thing. So we have to find a vast meaning to life, and if we reinvest in culture, it will infuse in youth, because these will be values that are accepted and very important for youth. Maybe a word, all the young people are not for the identity refold. We had a lot of conversations with the young people, 90,000 youth, 12,000 responded to our invitations. And what was striking is that they all wanted to be committed. They wanted to give a meaning to their lives through a commitment and forms of a commitment. There are different forms of commitment, but culture held a very pivotal position. And in what we mentioned in terms of solutions, I think we have to bring responses as to the commitment in cultural non-profit organizations, for example, associations, and this is emerging. Maybe 2 words of conclusion, because we're out of time, unfortunately. Difficult to conclude after this wonderful panel, but I've noted a few things. everything was very rich. Languages. We talked about languages, and Christopher talked about a common vocabulary. And I thought the bridging between those two comments was very important. We talked about technology as a tool that could be used for exchanges. We mentioned the Swift economics, Taylor Swift economics, but besides that, there's the economy of creation, which is not always a creation that fits into a planetary merchandising. And with culture, we're working on both legs when the economy is concerned. And we talked about learning, the learning process, thanks to philanthropy. Very important. And one thing that I feel is very important is, you've mentioned Churchill, but we can talk about Keynes, one of our key economists. Keynes was the first president of the Arts Council, which is the equivalent of the Ministry of Culture in the United Kingdom. And it was someone who had been sent by Churchill to purchase Degas paintings, paintings that had been dispersed. That's why when you go to the National Gallery, you see Degas works, and these works are circulating, these paintings. And I think culture brings happiness, the happiness when you see a work, when you listen to poetry, when you visit a museum. I think it's something very strong with museums to provide this to societies that are unfortunately fragmented. Thank you very much. I'd like to say that Françoise BENHAMOU published a book with Nathalie Heinisch, The Market of Art in the Digital World. So it's at the FNAC kiosk. So this afternoon, if you want to purchase this book, it's proposed there at the FNAC booth. Thank you.